Sanwa JLF is the gold standard for Japanese levers. It's also by far the most customizable lever on the market. Just have a look at some of these options out there. Ball tops, dust washers, shafts, bat tops, entire overhaul kits, removable shafts, gates and gate plates, springs. 15 pounds? What do they think? There's just one problem. There's no easy way to replace the switches present in the JLF. Well, until the Shuriken was released.
In 2021, BitBang Gaming released the original Shuriken, which allowed Sanwa JLF users to customize the switches they wanted to put in their JLF. So if you wanted something higher tension, you could do that. You wanted the same tension, you could do that. And be able to replace individual switches instead of entire assemblies. If you wanted a lighter feel, then you could do that as well. The only problem was it's only compatible with a certain range of switches, a certain type as well. So you can only do the 1/4 inch terminal switches. Well, they went back to the drawing board, and now there is the Shuriken version 2, which is finally compatible with those 0.187 inch switches within a certain range. You can see some of these switches here on the PCB itself, but a more complete list is available on the BitBang Gaming site. And finally, if you want those Omron D2RG silent switches, that's compatible. If you want some other switches that were not compatible with the original Shuriken, yay, they say there's over 500 options for you. So is this worth your money? Let's find out. All right, let's talk about the stock versus what you can get with the Shuriken V2. With the stock, you have 200 gram Omron switches that are soldered on. So these guys are not coming off unless you're handy with a soldering iron, etc. I am not, so this is not practical for me. And you also have to find the switches, that fit this PCB. Whereas with the Shuriken V2, it's really easy just to install switches. Just look at this. Push down, make sure I'm slid forward, make sure I'm all the way down, make sure I'm lined up with the guides that are printed on the board, and there we go. If I want to remove a switch, because it's gone bad, or I want to try a different strength, easy as that. So there's the major difference between these two boards. If you have similar switches, Omron 200 gram, you're not going to notice a thing, and the great thing is if a switch ever goes bad, then it's that simple to switch it. So let's compare the version 1 versus the version 2. And as you can see, the main difference here is really just the configuration of the terminals here. This only has 2. It's only going to fit those 1/4 inch terminals. I have heard people say they've forced on the 0.187s, but how reliable that is, I don't know. Whereas this version 2, definitely reliably accept them. On this, I feel like the retention mechanism is a little less secure, but it works fine. Now, if I look at the guides that are printed on here, I'm kind of not lined up with this switch. I have to back it out, and it feels a little more wobbly. Whereas if I put it on the version 2, this just feels way more secure. Now again, it's not going to matter because once you put your gate on top of this, those switches are going to be held in quite nicely on either Shuriken. So, what do you really gain by having this versus this? Again, it's going to be the wider switch compatibility. So, as you can see, just on the PCBs here, this lists so many more switches, and a more complete list is available on the BitBang Gaming site. So, that's the main difference. If you have a Shuriken V1, is it worth going to the V2? We'll talk about that later in this video. Let's talk about how to install switches into the Shuriken, see how easy or difficult it really is. Now I have one installed already just to see what it looks like, where it should line up, etc. You'll notice there are little lines for guides, so your switch should fit within those contours. All we need to do is just put this on top, kind of mash it down, and then make sure it's slotted forward and lined up with our guidelines. And then just make sure the little pin is lined up, it's nice and centered. if we've got that, then you should be good to go. Just repeat for the other 2, in my case, or the other 3 if you've only gotten 1 switch down. Really easy, does not take a lot of effort. It's just a matter of, a lot of fight stick stuff is you need to be firm, but also careful that you're not, grilling a terminal or something into oblivion. So just be mindful and you'll get it. So how easy is this to install? Turns out it's pretty simple. And as long as you're comfortable opening up your stick and getting your hands dirty a little bit, yeah, it's really easy. I'll show you step by step how to do it. First thing is we've got this piece, this clear piece here. That is the gate. This joystick has an octo gate. So what we want to do is locate these 4 retention tabs and just kind of nudge one down while you pull it loose. You may have to kind of finagle these a little bit and just kind of work on one at a time, just slightly push forward until that comes off. Now, remember how you don't have to worry too much about how this is oriented, but you do want to watch for these tabs here. So let's just put that aside, and now our old switch assembly is free. We just want to pull this out, and remember how this is facing. So in our case, it was facing that way. We don't want to reorient our joystick by accident or do anything funny like that. So we'll set that aside, and we'll slide the Shuriken V2 in. It feels a little bit heavier than the original assembly. And then, now it's your choice if you want to plug it in before you slide it on. I probably should have done that. It's a little bit more assuring when you get that. There we go. You should get a slight click when it registers. Just make sure it's seated all the way down. Your switches are still in place. Take that gate, and remember there's little pointy tabs up top. You don't want to mash those in. You want those to stick out. Kind of line it back up with your 4 tabs. Nudge them in a little bit, one at a time. And make sure you get, yep, there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's really how easy it is to install the Shuriken or Shuriken V2. Now that the Shuriken V2 is installed, let's give it a little spin. Alright. I'm not feeling any stickiness or off-centeredness, so if I go down, up, we're getting 2 switches for the diagonals and only 1 for the cardinals. So that's feeling pretty good. It is feeling much lighter. And the explanation is the review switches I was sent are 100 grams of force versus the 200 grams force that are these switches. So half the resistance. And if you are more of a surgical player, I mean, you're doing motions like this, you're very light on the stick, then the lighter switches might be for you. If you find yourself very fatigued after playing on the default guy, maybe lighter switches are for you. Bitbang Gaming sells 50 gram, 100 gram, 125 gram, 200 gram, and 400 gram. So if you are someone who wants, you want that same JLF feel from switches, you can go with the 200 gram. Shouldn't be able to tell a difference. And then if you want more resistance, go for the 400. For me, someone like me, that's probably what I would be shopping for, because I just like to gate ride and be a scrub and grind as hard as I can in hopes that I will get a move out. For those of you who are just like, yep, this is all I need, maybe the lighter switch is for you. So that said, I mean, that's kind of the entire point of the Shuriken, is to add that new dimension of customization to the JLF. So you weren't able to, comfortably change these before, and now you can. You can just slot in the switch strength you want. And there's also the possibility of using the Omron reed switches, which are silent. They are mentioned on the Bitbang Gaming site, but they do not sell these. I believe Paradise Arcade sell these for about $6 or $7 per. So kind of pricey, but if you really need the silent JLF treatment, then that might be for you. That said, if you're looking to add that bit of customization or, you know, replace this when it dies, then the Shuriken is really for you. You don't even have to wait. Just drop one in. It takes 5 minutes. Just open up your stick, take off that gate, slide it out, take off the power, put the power on the Shuriken, put the Shuriken in, put the gate back on, button up your stick, and you're set to go. So it takes no more than 10 minutes, doesn't take a lot of DIY skill, and there you go. You have just a little bit closer to perfection on your stick. Let's talk about pros, cons, and should I upgrade? Now, if you're using the TPMA, the Shuriken V2 is a straight upgrade for the reasons we've already talked about, changing individual switches and customizing your switch tension. If you're looking into upgrading your JLF in other ways, say the Auto Kit or the JLF Pro or just individual springs, gates, etc., then don't sleep on being able to customize your switches as well to, for the playstyle that you like. Now, what about if I have the V1? Is it worth it to upgrade to the V2? And really, if this has the switches you like, it's playing just fine, there's not much of justification for moving to this. However, if there are switches that work with this, that aren't going to work with this, say the Omron D2RVs for silent switches, then this is not going to work for you. You're going to have to upgrade. So that said, there is one use case where the V1 is actually preferred over the V2, and that is if you have the Sonjux V3, this guy is compatible, this guy is not, according to their website. Now, I believe both of these are compatible with, say, the Auto Kit and the Paradise Arcade Magenta. So there is that consideration. Let's talk about value. A TPMA per shot replacement is going to cost you around $16 to $20 or so, whereas the Shuriken V2 currently is $16, and for a pack of 4 switches, you're going to be paying $11 to $12 depending on which switch you're buying. So yeah, there is a bigger upfront cost with the Shuriken, but every time you replace this TPMA, you're paying another $17 to $20 or so, whereas a Switch is relatively cheap if you're buying it from BitBang Gaming. Now, if you go outside of BitBang Gaming to, say, DigiKey, Mouser, etc., then you're going to be paying a bit more for Switch. It's at least $8 plus shipping, plus tax, etc. So keep that in mind. If there's a Switch that they don't have that you want, you're just going to have to factor that into your budget. So overall, I think it's a decent buy, and again, versus the TPMA, replacing that every so often, you're going to be paying about the same overall. BitBang Gaming has another successful product here, and I feel it's a great iteration over the version 1. First of all, with the new Switch terminals, it's easier to place your switches, and they support those 187s. So there's more options that everybody's going to get to try out, and hopefully the community steps up, finds out, hey, how do these switches feel, which ones are great, which ones are not so great, so that we can get that information out there. And if you're interested in getting your own Shuriken V2, check out bitbanggaming.com, or I think this will be available on Focus Attack soon enough. This has been Zevros for the Arcade Stick.
The Arcade Stick.